Hey guys, it's Chandler, and welcome to the Healing Heroes.
I promise you.
I'm Chandler Stroud, an executive, wife, and busy mom of two, who after years of living with anxiety, health struggles, and an unshakable feeling like I should be happier, made a profound discovery that changed everything. Join me on a journey where unexpected paths lead to healing and more happiness. On this show, we'll explore unconventional ways to unlock more joy in your own life with the help of my very own healers and trusted advisors, the Healing Heroes. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Healing Heroes podcast. I'm your host Chandler, and I'm really excited to be here today sharing Lea Morgan's Hero Highlight episode. This is a special series that we are doing in honor of our first birthday this July. And if you're not new here, these episodes will give you a chance to catch up on conversations you missed by listening to some of our favorite moments from the last year with each of our heroes. And today, it's Lea Morgan's turn. She is our resident hero and psychic medium who was so instrumental in my own healing journey, and I've had many incredible conversations with over the last year. So to start, let me just ground everyone quickly in what psychic mediumship is in case you're less familiar. Essentially, psychic mediumship is the ability to perceive and communicate information with and from the spirit world. A psychic medium serves as a bridge, helping us to receive messages from deceased loved ones, spirit guides, or other non-physical beings to offer guidance, healing, and reassurance. As I've shared on the show before, I first sought Lea's help, not to speak to the deceased, but to understand if God or the universe was trying to deliver me a message that I just wasn't receiving. After experiencing 4 mutually exclusive flooding incidents in my home, there was just this sense, this questioning I had of, is there something behind this? There was this pull to understand if there was meaning behind what I was experiencing, because it required so many of my resources, time, effort, money to fix this problem each time. And I can't explain it. It was just this feeling like there was something else at stake, and I needed to unearth what that was. And a friend suggested that Lea might be the exact right person to speak with. And so I gave her a call. And while I got my questions answered by Lea, my reading became about so much more than just my home or my living situation. And I'm forever grateful to her for the insights she shared, for connecting me with my loved ones long gone, and for helping to guide me on my path forward. So with that, I am thrilled to introduce you to our hero and psychic medium, Lea Morgan. Can you quickly overview what psychic mediumship is and why people typically reach out to you for help?
Yeah. So mediumship, in short, is really talking to people's deceased loved ones. If you think of psychic information on a radio band, mediumship is a channel. It's like 99.7. I mean, I made the number up, but who knows? It's just a specific channel on a radio band. And it's where deceased humans generally hold the mic and talk to people. So I talk to people's deceased loved ones. But in that work, I have come across so many other interesting things about the way we get information, the way it may come to us. And so that's where we get into the clairs. And the clairs are really not used in normal human life, but in psychic communities, it's really normal to talk about clairs. And what it means is, how did you get the information? Just like I would say, I saw it, or I heard it, or I felt it, or I thought it. The clairs indicate how you're getting information from energy, right? So clairvoyant, there are 4 main ones. There are a lot of them, but there are 4 main ones that people talk about. Clairvoyance is clear seeing, and we'll get more into these if you want, but I'll go over each one. So clairaudience
No, I would love that.
is clear hearing. So when you will hear, again, usually spontaneously experienced by others, they'll hear someone's voice calling their name and no one is there, or they'll hear a loved one say something and the loved one's deceased. That's outside yourself, clear hearing. Clairaudience inside your head is a little harder to explain because you don't necessarily hear it in a certain voice. But what I always say is it sounds like when you read silently to yourself. So when you read, like if you're in bed at night reading like I do, and you're reading a sentence, you're hearing the words in your head, hearing with quotes, hearing the words in your head as you read them, but you don't know what word comes next. Claircognizance is clear knowing. This is what you experienced, which does come as like, you can think of it like a computer file. It comes as like a download of information. And it's as if instead of just seeing an image or just hearing a few words, you get an entire story in like a file that then opens when it gets into your brain. And then if you're willing, it comes out in the form of writing, in the form of painting, in the form of anything, songwriting. And clairsentience is clear feeling. It happens sometimes with people who are really close individuals. And these are usually two living individuals when it happens to people who aren't mediums. But you can actually feel someone else's emotions or pain. And so I know people who have felt a random pain or a random emotion only to find out their parent or their child or their best friend is having this experience. So that's another interesting thing that we'll get into is that the deceased and in any spiritual form, like angels, guides, deceased loved ones, deceased pets, they're not the only ones that communicate with energy. Living humans do as well. Every human that comes to be on earth, we all start as souls, has at least one spirit guide that's going to journey with them from the time they're born until the time they die. We're not really aware of it, but we do this life thing as a team, right? We do at least one of us here on earth, one of us still in spirit form. The analogy I always give that is like if you're an astronaut and you're going to the moon, you will have someone in charge of ground control, right? At NASA, somebody in charge of your whole trip who will try to give you really meaningful information for this journey. So they love us. They are team us. They want to help us have the most expansive, beneficial, full time while we're here on earth. And if we can get to a place where we're listening to them or seeing their signs or receiving their breadcrumbs, which are always there, then we can better navigate while we're here. So it's really important and they're cool. There's a big feeling from people I've noticed that their spirit guides are their deceased loved ones. And while that can happen, it's usually not the case. And the first way to know that is, well, they needed to be in spirit when I was born to be my guide. So yes, it could be a loved one that was deceased or a relative before you were born, but it's really usually somebody who, it's a specialty, right? So it's their job. Not every deceased person is a guide. I hate to say job because it's not the right word, but it's as close a word as we've got. It's like a job you can have in soul form is to be a spirit guide.
Do they apply for this job?
Well,
are they
that's
gifted
a good
this
question.
job?
I wonder if it's just a recognition of aptitudes. I know they have to have been on Earth before.
Oh, that's interesting.
They have to have shown some sort of proficiency at walking this on their own. So then they say, okay, I feel like I could help somebody else walk that. And then who knows how they're selected.
I love that. It's really reassuring too, to think you've got a helping hand.
Always, at least one and often more. I mean, the analogy I give for this is like school. So like, how in school you have your homeroom teacher that you usually have, let's say 9th through 12th grade, but then you'll also have every other teacher for every other subject. So guides are like that too. You'll have one that's like Chandler's guide, like I am helping Chandler through life. But then you'll have others that will be like, ooh, I help her with work. I help her with friendship. I help her with her relationship with herself. These can be all different guides. You could have a creativity guide, or if you're a writer, a writing guide. You can have all kind of specific guides that come in and out and probably work with a handful of people.
I'd imagine most of your inquiries do come from people who are desperately missing someone and navigating their grief. How have you seen your clients heal from communicating with the dead?
That's been such a gift to be a part of, because the healing quite often happens in the reading and then sometimes after, and people will email me and explain how. But as you can imagine, grief is at many levels. There are people who have lost grandparents or parents, which is terribly sad, but it's in the natural order of things. And then there are people who have lost spouses or children, which is not necessarily in the natural order of things, especially if your spouse is young or it was sudden. So there can be people who understandably need a lot of reassurance. And what's fascinating about my communication with spirit is, especially in situations, so let's take one that's really, really, really tragic. So that would be like an unexpected death of a child. The deceased individual that I'm speaking to is able to take me through the scenario of their passing in a way that I can describe it to their parents as if I'm the eyes, if that makes sense. They're like, it's almost like they put me inside their body and show me all the landmarks or where they were or what happened or how it went. And the parents will often know some details, maybe if not all, but I will know none. Please keep that in mind. When I get in the reading, I will know no details. I won't even know they lost a child.
Wow. Lee.
And then this deceased individual, who is very well, by the way, will take me through their passing and give me things to tell their parents that only their parents would know about their passing. And then explain to me through that kind of retelling of the story what their feelings were, because everyone's greatest concern for their loved one is, did they suffer? Were they scared? Were they alone? So they can give me information that answers those three questions. Wow. I didn't know how they lost a child. And then suddenly I'm going through this narrative of the story they know. And I'm explaining how the individual, which would be their child, felt at every stage. And then I'm explaining their child is well now, because all of us who die are absolutely well in a way we can't comprehend, no matter how we die. And can you imagine how that would change a parent's life? I mean, it does not bring their child back, and that's not okay that they've lost their child. But just to know how they felt or where they were or what happened, or that they know what happened and that they're still around their parents, because then they also will give me the random information like, tell dad to stop, fiddling with the keys in his pocket. And I won't see dad doing that, and they'll just start laughing. I mean, laughing? Like what? How did that happen? How did laughter happen in the middle of that conversation? That's healing.
Why do you think people often feel hesitant to share their experiences of hearing or seeing a deceased loved one?
So many of my answers generally go back to cultural conditioning. I'd say maybe since the industrial age. This kind of goes into small history lesson.
I'm like, I didn't expect you to go there, but let's do it.
Our culture has begun to focus more on the left brain, the very logical, scientifically based, theory checked, factual, provable area of information, which is a super valuable area of information. Right. I'm an and person, and both, not a or,
I think anyone on this show is an and person, so I can appreciate that.
That is very, very, very valuable information. However, it has done so at the expense of intuitive, unexplainable feeling information. Right?
Yeah.
When really we're all better off if we have all of it. So because of that, and because, there aren't really any people alive before that time, we now live in a culture of a bunch of people who were taught just by repetition and mirroring how to be taken seriously, how to be liked, how to be valued in our culture. And it did not include telling a bunch of people weird stuff that you can't explain.
Gonna make it through.
Can you explain what a visitation dream is and how that differs from a regular
Yes.
dream?
So the first is always the qualifier of what we went over at the beginning. Are they well? Are they positive? Are you getting a good vibe from it? Is the first kind of check mark. We all are going to dream about our deceased loved ones. That's how our bodies work out what's going on, right? We're not all going to get visitations. And a visitation is specifically, now I do not understand in reality how it works, but I'm going to tell you how I understand it. How I understand it is that in a sleep state, our brain waves are in such a formation and our guard is down, meaning our logical brain is like not minding the what's real, what's not fence, right? And our loved ones who are gifted in this area, and we'll come back to that, are able to, in soul form, communicate with our soul. Because we do have a soul in here. Even if our body needs to sleep, our soul can be awake. The soul needs no rest, right? The body does, this human form. So our soul, our loved one, we can use my dad as an example, even though I've never had a dream visitation from him. And he could come and my mind would record it like a dream. Like all of a sudden I'd be like, I see dad. And usually they're standing very still. Usually they look really, really, really healthy, maybe even younger than they were when they died. And usually, if not always, they communicate telepathically with the dreamer. So it's not, their mouths don't really move, but you will automatically understand what they're saying is things like, I'm here. I love you. I'm fine. You're fine. And it's almost like a moment. The way it's described to me is like a moment stopped in time. Does that make sense? And sometimes they'll say things like, I'll come again, or I can't come again. And we're not going to get into why they're busy. You know, it's not about us. I'll tell you right now, it is absolutely not about our value or how much they love us or anything like that. But sometimes they'll give like a parting instruction, right? Or kind of update on where they'll be or not be. And then they'll go and you'll probably go back into dreaming and then you'll wake up. Well, the next day, we all know what it's like to dream. And you know, when you first wake up, I mean, this happens to me all the time. I first wake up and I'll be like, that dream was crazy. I'm going to write it down. And by the time I have gone to pour water in the coffee maker, I can't even recall the doggone thing. I'll be like, it was something about a ball.
Yes.
And a gorilla. Like, I'll have like weird points that I remember, but I won't remember it like I did 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Gonna make it through.
We're so judgmental. We're so hard on ourselves. And I feel like what you do, human design, tarot, these are great ways to take a real look at where you might have to work a little bit harder and what your opportunities are, but through a lens that lets you celebrate those in some way versus feeling under attack or judged by them, which is so helpful.
I mean, I found the key to navigating anything is to know, really honestly know yourself without judgment. Just know.
Yeah.
And then you can tune yourself up a little bit in different areas for different situations. You know, and speaking of like how we were talking earlier about nature, nurture, and soul personality, what's super interesting to me is I can't speak to nature and soul personality. Those are your DNA and your soul personality are going to happen. But what's so interesting to me is in the nurture category, most all traits that are either developed or reinforced by nurture are all about being safe.
What do you mean by that?
So if you're glass half full,
Yes.
and you consider that you can overuse that a bit. Like,
Yes.
okay.
I've learned that.
So what that means to me is that somewhere in your upbringing or family of origin or life experiences when you were developing, it made you feel safe to feel like everything was going to be okay. To the point that you maybe didn't look at the actual factual information about the situation. It literally served you. And we don't judge that. We say, thank you for serving me. You could have saved me in these instances, right? Like my independence in an alcoholic household very likely saved me in several instances. But that exact same characteristic can hold me back because I'm not in the same circumstances as I was then.
Okay, now I get it. That's very helpful. And yes, I think you hit the nail on the head. And a large part of the reason that I started this journey in the first place was because all of the emotions, traits, things that served me so well in my childhood to survive some of those tough years were getting triggered in my life prior to starting a lot of this work. And I don't think my nervous system or my body knew the difference. It was really just keep her safe, keep her safe, keep her safe. But like a lot of the control that I needed, a lot of the organization and things that, to your point, really served me growing up in a household where I didn't know what was going to happen next were not serving me. They were, in fact, holding me back and making me feel a lot less happy in my day-to-day as an adult woman.
Gonna make it through.
Einstein had this quote that I will read so I don't get it wrong. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. So Einstein was basically like, this is where all the good stuff is. And then you use your rational mind to figure out how to do it. And instead, we live in a world, I've grown up in a world where the rational mind is the boss and the intuitive mind is kind of kicked out as that doesn't make any sense.
Yes. And that's why we're telling you, you've got to reconnect with it, everybody.
Yeah.
It's so something that we push down through our whole lives to do exactly what you're saying, which is like the rational mind has been seen as like king, right?
Yeah.
But there is so much power in that intuitive knowing
Yeah.
that we don't exercise enough. And that's what we're here to share. Here are tools to reconnect with that knowing.
Yeah.
And bring it forth so that you can then use your rational mind to be the servant of those bigger ideals and bigger hopes and dreams. And that's truly where the deeper happiness is.
Your story of the podcast is so perfect for this discussion because, first of all, a very rationally driven mind would have felt, which is my understanding of what you did, would have kind of felt and kind of known that it was time for you to transition into something new. But it didn't make any more sense than that, right?
Yeah.
And then through our reading, you got some information on maybe zoning in on what that something, at least the world in which that something new existed, right? But you still
Yeah.
were like, I don't really know. Now, super rational mind would have just thrown all that out and said, you know what? I have a job. You don't get to do everything you want to do in life. Why reach for the stars? That's silly. Everything's secure. Why go changing stuff? I can't make any sense of this feeling I'm having, so I'm just going to throw it out. Right.
Yeah.
And so, because what I love about what Einstein said is he acknowledges that both parts of both minds are important, but he's saying one should serve the other. So what you did was allow that. You said, okay, I have this intuitive feeling / knowing. I've got a little more info to zone in on it. And now I'm going to ask my rational mind to try to figure out how to make this knowing real, like, 3D. So you were doing what he said. You were asking your rational mind to be the servant, which it is. Like, okay, now help me figure out how to do this. I'm not going to go nuts and just blow up my whole life. I'm just going to try to figure it out. And then because you were open to it, your intuition / spirit / who knows, your higher self was like, she is looking for solutions. She heard the bell ring. She heard that something new is on the horizon. She's looking for solutions. Go ahead and download that plan to her. And then here we are today.
Gonna make it through.
Lee, what are some ways our listeners can be more receptive to what spirits may be trying to tell them in their own lives, or simply become more in tune with their intuition so they're able to navigate difficult situations and make those tougher decisions on their own?
The number one thing is to create space. And by space, I mean like literal space, or no phone, no TV, no radio, no people. Just create pockets of space in your life where you could hear a pin drop, because that is the subtlety with which information comes to us quite often. It could be a thought. It can be a feeling. It could be like an emotional feeling. It could be a physical sensation. All of these are ways to communicate with you. Believe it or not, many of our thoughts are actually telepathically planted by spirit, either our higher selves or our loved ones or our guides. So if we aren't ever in a space to be able to hear something that's subtle or feel something that's subtle will miss it, right? So that's the number one thing is
so helpful.
Put space in your life. Obstacle 2 is the determination of our logical brain, which is to write off everything that doesn't have a logical explanation. So what I offer there is just if for 1 week, make the decision to suspend your disbelief. And do that by just keeping a notepad around. And every time you get a gut feeling about something, just write it on the notepad. It can be as simple as, I think Chandler's going to call me, or I just thought about Chandler for some reason. And then you might call, or it could be, it's going to rain. I don't care what it is. Any idea that pops into your head that seems to come from nowhere. Or when you're thinking about something, if you have an idea about how it might go down, write it down. And then at the end of the week, look back at those jotted notes and see what turned out to be accurate information. Because we don't want to belittle our logical brain. It's important, but we do want to loosen its strangle on our life. So the most loving way to do that is to very slowly and methodically show it evidence that the other part of our knowing that may not be as, easy to explain doesn't need to be thrown out. It can be part of the party. Let's have one big party where my logical brain and my intuitive brain get to happily coexist and help each other.
I love that visual. But I cannot thank you enough for being so open and sharing your journey with us today. And to those listening, if you have all found today's discussion helpful, please share it with friends who might also benefit. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also visit healingheroespodcast.com to get resources, meet the heroes, and share your ideas for future episodes. And until next time, remember, be curious, be courageous, and be kind to yourself. You've got this.